Shelia Jones, and not only am I, can you all hear me okay? Because I'm just making sure, because I can't necessarily hear myself okay, but as long as you can hear me, I'm good. And my job is that I am a professional storyteller and performer. That's my job. I get to travel all across the country doing performances and telling stories. And I've been very blessed by God that this has not been something that I've had to be trained in. God has allowed me to have this gift from the time I was born. He's also allowed me to have the opportunities to be able to improve on it and to become more of what He wants me to be. And I have learned that I need to use that gift for Him. And whatever gift we have, if we turn it over to Him, He grows it a whole lot bigger. And whatever gift we have that we don't do nothing with, we'll watch one day as it's gone. And we wonder what happened. And so I'm really glad that I get to tell stories. And when I tell stories about the Bible, tell stories of the Bible, I don't just tell Bible stories. Because Jesus didn't just tell Bible stories. Because before Jesus said them, they weren't Bible stories. Just a hint, just a thought to think about. We call them Bible stories now, but when He told them, they were just stories. And He used stories of things that were going on in people's lives right then. And I sometimes, and I'll give you this example before I tell this story. He tells the story, and he said, well, doesn't tell the story, but he gives the example, and he says, it will be difficult for it will be difficult for those who are rich to enter into the kingdom of heaven. It would be like a camel going through the eye of a needle. And for most of us today, if we thought of an eye of a needle, you think of a needle, little bitty thing and a little bitty eye, and you're going, those poor rich people, they will never make it. They'll never make it. You'd be like, oh, them poor people, they're over. It's done. They never get to the eye of the needle. But that's not what they meant. So when I was in when I was in Israel, in Nazareth, they showed us what the eye of the needle was during Jesus' time. In Jesus' time, the gates that were around, the walls that were around the cities, and they always had a large gate in the front. And when it was time to close the gates, it was time to close the gates, and they did. But every now and then, someone was coming running home late. You know that, So even back there in Jesus' time, folk were running home late. And when they needed to get in, they didn't just open the whole big thing. They opened a smaller door that was the height of a man. And that was called the eye of the needle. So take a look at that door over there. Everybody look at it. Now, can a camel get through that door? No, can a camel get through that door?
It's going to be hard.
What'd you say?
It's going to be hard.
It's going to be hard. But can a camel get through that door? Yes, the camel can get through the door. It's just not going to be easy. You see, Jesus told about rich folk, He said, it is difficult for a rich person to get into heaven. It's like a camel coming through the eye of a needle. It's difficult and hard, but not impossible. And that's what we have to know for ourselves, what He meant during that time. He didn't say it was impossible, because that would be definitely our eye of a needle. All of us looking at a needle going, poor people. I'm not getting rich, I'm going to be poor. Jesus will come and take me. But what Jesus was saying was, it'll be difficult, but they can get through. And that's a powerful statement. He used the stories of the time. It was Sunday, and I was at church. And I came to church because that's the only place I knew to go. Because I was tired. I'd had one of those weeks that just didn't seem to make any sense. It was hard that week. And difficult. And I was questioning God at every turn. Why were things happening the way they were happening, and why wasn't He here with me in His presence? I didn't feel Him anywhere around me. So I went to church on that Sunday, not for any other particular reason than it's the only place I knew to go to try to get some of God. I went through the whole service. We sang, and I heard the preacher, and everything happened, and afterwards, I didn't feel any different. I didn't feel God at all. So as everybody was walking out of the church, I was going opposite stride stream, not talking to anybody, and I was going down towards the front of the church. And there at the front of our church, there's a there were benches there, and I sat 2 rows back about, and from the very front, and I sat there and I looked up at the big cross that we have up there, and I kept going, well, God, where are you? Why aren't you here? It's just too hard. I can't see you, I don't feel you, nothing's changed. I don't get it. I don't get it. I was just struggling. My eyes were closed and I was struggling, and finally I opened my eyes and I looked, and as I opened my eyes, out of the corner of my eye, up in the very front where we have some space there before you hit the stage and the big old cross is there, but on that floor right there, I saw out of my corner of my eye, and I looked up real good, and there was a little girl. She was probably about 4 years old. She had a pink dress on and her blonde hair and little bows in it and little church shoes on with little lace socks on them, and she was in the middle of the floor and she was dancing. She was twirling and moving and turning and kicking out her feet every now and then, and she was dancing. And every now and then she would stop and she'd look over, and I looked over where she looked, and there was her father. He was on the other aisle, and he was a couple rows back, and he was just standing, and just the way he looked at her, I knew that was his father. And I watched him as he watched her, and she kind of cocked her head every now and then, looked at her dad like, you coming dancing? But you could tell he was one of those manly men. And he wasn't so certain that was the right thing to do, particularly in church. Should he get out there and dance with his daughter? Should he stand right where he is? What was the right thing to do? And then she'd just look away like, oh, well, all right. She went back to dancing. I whispered over to him, or in a loud whisper aspect, and I said, what's her name? He said, her name is Grace. And I looked at her dancing and free, exactly where I wanted to be. So I got up and I went down there where she was, and I started twirling and moving and kicking. And for a moment there we locked eyes, and she looked at me. And she had that look in her eyes like, well, of course, you're dancing. And we went on, and we just danced in our own space, and I twirled and I whirled, and everything I felt at that moment, every doubt I had of God at that moment was gone. I was dancing with Grace. And I danced for a while, and we didn't have to talk. We danced around each other, and that father watched, and then after a little bit, I was all right. God had already said everything he needed to say to me in that dance, and I was good. It was time for me to walk out the door and go give some of what I had away to my friends out there in the hallway. And so I started walking out. I walked by him, and I just saw the way he looked at his daughter and wondered if he should. And as I passed him, I didn't turn, but I placed my hand on his shoulder, and I just said, dance with your daughter, Daddy. And I walked on. And just as I went out the door, I turned around, and he was walking towards his daughter. Because sometimes we just need to dance with God's grace.